Your surname may be younger than your country, but your DNA may remember the steppe. That fear hides inside ordinary family clues. An old last name on a census page, a grandfather who said the family came from the east, a story about horsemen, borderlands, or people who never stayed in one place, a table where everyone drinks milk without thinking about it. Then a DNA test returns a paternal line like R1a or R1b, and the old story no longer sounds like family decoration. It starts to sound like a trace. Some families carry pieces of a Bronze Age movement they were never taught to name. Long before modern nations, long before most surnames, pastoralist groups from the Pontic-Caspian grasslands moved across parts of Europe and Asia. Many researchers connect this horizon with the Yamnaya and related steppe cultures roughly 5,000 years ago. They left no family Bible, no national flag. What they left were patterns in bones, graves, languages, and chromosomes. This does not mean your family is secretly one thing. It does not mean an old surname proves ancient blood, and it does not mean a single haplogroup can rewrite who you are. But when several signs appear together, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. 7 clues can point toward ancient steppe ancestry. None proves it alone. Together, they can turn a harmless family rumor into a genetic cold case. The caveat matters. Ancient steppe blood is not racial purity. It is not superiority, nobility, intelligence, moral worth, or destiny. It is not ownership of a land, a language, or a culture. The phrase only means inherited DNA segments that appear connected to ancient pastoralist expansions from the grasslands north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. Those segments spread through mixture. They move through marriage, conflict, adoption, migration, and the slow merging of communities. The genome records that movement, but it does not rank it. A surname is much younger than the event. In many families, last names became stable only in the medieval or early modern period. A Bronze Age migration happened thousands of years before that. So a surname can point toward a region where steppe ancestry later became common, but by itself it cannot reach back to the steppe. Y DNA is sharper but much narrower. It follows one paternal line, father to son, through the Y chromosome. That line can survive for many generations, but it is still only one thread in a huge family cloth. Mitochondrial DNA follows one maternal line. It passes through mothers, and it preserves a different thread. Autosomal DNA is wider. It comes from all recent ancestral lines, mixed and reshuffled each generation, which is why it can show broad ancestry patterns from Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, South Asia, or other regions. Then there is lactase persistence, the ability many adults have to digest milk. In Europe, one well-known variant near the LCT gene, often discussed around RS 4988235, became common under strong selection. It can connect to pastoralist life, but it is not an ethnic label. A milk-tolerant family is not automatically steppe descended. Once those limits are clear, the signs can be read without turning them into a myth. The first hidden sign is surname geography. Not the spelling alone, not how the name sounds at a family reunion. The clue is where the surname, village name, or oldest known family place clusters on the map. Families rooted in Northern, Central, or Eastern Europe often sit in regions where steppe-related ancestry became part of the population after the Bronze Age. The British Isles, parts of the Balkans, the Volga region, the Baltic world, and wide stretches of Slavic-speaking Europe all carry layered histories where steppe ancestry can be one strand beneath later labels. A name from Scotland, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, Serbia, Germany, or the Volga does not prove an ancient pastoralist ancestor. A South Asian family name does not prove it either. The same warning applies everywhere. Names move, names change. Names are adopted, translated, shortened, or assigned by governments and churches. But geography still matters. If the oldest paper trail points to a region repeatedly touched by later descendants of steppe-related movements, the surname becomes a location marker. It tells you where to place the next clue. A family name from a northern plain, an eastern borderland, a mountain corridor, or a river frontier may be sitting on top of much older population movement. The old migration map failed when people treated modern labels as the starting point. A modern nation is too recent. A language group is too recent. Even a church register is too recent. Ancient DNA pushes the map backward, below the level of passports and surnames. In 2015, major ancient DNA studies published in Nature changed how many people understood Bronze Age Europe. Researchers compared skeletons from different periods and saw a dramatic shift. People associated with the corded ware culture in parts of northern and central Europe carried a large amount of ancestry related to steppe populations. That did not mean every corded ware person was simply Yamnaya. Ancient populations were never that clean. But the signal was strong enough to change the model. That is why a surname clue can feel ordinary and suspicious at the same time. The name may be recent. The region behind it may not be. The second hidden sign is a migration legend that refuses to disappear. Many families have one. Someone came from the east. Someone crossed a plain. Someone was attached to horses. Someone lived near a border where armies and traders passed. Someone said the family was not originally from the village, even though the graveyard says otherwise. Most of these stories are not Bronze Age memories. They are usually later echoes. A tale about Cossack-like frontiers, Germanic movement, Slavic migration, Indo-Iranian ancestry, warrior ancestors, mounted raiders, or borderland service may come from the medieval or early modern world. It may come from an event only a few hundred years old, but the shape of the story can sit above older movement. Bronze Age steppe expansions moved west into cultural worlds connected with corded ware and bell beaker contexts. Other steppe-related movements pushed east and south into roots later tied to Indo-Iranian language histories. These were not single marching columns. They were complicated waves of people, herds, households, and ideas moving across grasslands, river valleys, and settlement zones. A family story about horsemen is not a scientific result. Still, it becomes more interesting when the genetic evidence points toward the same broad corridors. The second layer was stranger because oral memory does not preserve DNA, but it can preserve direction. East, frontier, riders, outsiders. A family that arrived, a family that did not quite belong. Those words can survive after the real event has been forgotten. The trap is taking folklore too literally. Old warrior stories are easy to inflate. Many families have heroic legends because families prefer heroes to census records. A tale can be invented, borrowed, or reshaped to fit pride. Yet erased migration memory can leave a bruise in the record. A surname on the edge of a steppe corridor plus a family legend of Eastern movement does not prove ancient steppe ancestry. It only raises the question. The paternal line is where that question becomes harder to avoid. The third hidden sign is a Y-DNA haplogroup often discussed in connection with steppe expansions. Two names appear again and again in this conversation, R1b-M269 and R1a-M417. They are not the only paternal lines in Europe or Asia. They are not exclusive to ancient steppe peoples. They do not define ethnicity. But their expansion patterns became central to the debate because many branches appear in regions transformed during and after the Bronze Age. R1b-M269 is especially common in much of Western Europe. One major branch, R1b-L51, is often discussed in relation to bell beaker expansions and the reshaping of Western European paternal lines. In some regions, ancient DNA shows a striking turnover in male lineages during the Bronze Age. R1a-M417 has its own map. R1a-Z282 is widespread in parts of Eastern and Northern Europe. R1a-Z93 appears across parts of Central Asia and South Asia, and it is often discussed in relation to Indo-Iranian linked movements. These branches do not tell one simple story. They are old, branching, and heavily reshaped by later history. Still, when a male line test returns one of these branches, the family has a sharper clue than a surname. A Y-DNA result is like finding one old thread pulled tight through time. It ignores most of your ancestry, but it can preserve a narrow paternal root with unusual force. Father to son, son to grandson. a line that may pass through languages, religions, and borders without changing its chromosome. The evidence points in a narrower direction when the subclade is known. A broad R1a or R1b result is too general. A deeper branch can narrow the geography and period. R1b-L51, R1a-Z282, and R1a-Z93 do not make a person Yamnaya. They only place one paternal line inside a family of markers that researchers often compare with steppe-related movements. That distinction matters. A haplogroup is not a crown, it is not a tribe, it is not a secret title. It is a genetic fingerprint from one ancestral line. The fourth hidden sign is an autosomal steppe signal, and this clue is broader. Autosomal DNA reports can show ancestry components described as Northern European, Eastern European, Baltic, Slavic, Germanic, Celtic, Scandinavian, Central Asian, or South Asian. Consumer labels vary by company, and they change as reference panels improve. One test might call a segment Eastern European. Another might place it closer to Baltic or Scandinavian. A third might hide the older layer beneath a modern national category. This is where many families misunderstand their results. The app is not showing the Bronze Age directly. It is showing similarities to modern reference groups, and those modern groups already contain many ancient layers. Steppe-related ancestry is one of those layers. In the 2015 Nature study, led by Wolfgang Hack and colleagues, ancient DNA helped show that people from the corded ware horizon carried substantial ancestry related to Yamnaya groups from the steppe. Another 2015 Nature study, led by Morten Allentoft and colleagues, examined Bronze Age population dynamics across Eurasia, showing large-scale movement and mixture during that period. The old picture had been too still. Farmers spread into Europe earlier from Anatolia. Hunter-gatherers were already there. Then, steppe-related ancestry arrived in powerful new proportions during the Bronze Age. Bell-Beaker contexts added another shock. In Britain, ancient DNA showed major ancestry change after the arrival of Beaker-associated groups, with steppe-related ancestry becoming deeply embedded. Again, that does not mean one people simply erased another in every place. The process varied by region, but the genetic shift was too large to ignore. For a family, the strongest clue is not one component, it is the stack. A borderland surname, a migration legend, a Y-DNA branch associated with steppe debates, an autosomal report that keeps pointing toward Northern, Eastern, or Central Asian corridors. Each clue can be explained away alone. Together, they start to form a shape. Imagine a family with a surname that looks ordinary on paper. The oldest known village sits near an Eastern European borderland, a place where empires changed their maps and churches kept records in more than one language. The family always described itself by a modern nation and a religion. That was the identity that mattered. It was the identity written on forms, gravestones, and marriage records. Then there was the grandfather's story. He used to say the family came from riders, not nobles, not kings, riders. He said the men were connected to horses and open country, and that the family had once moved west from somewhere farther east. Nobody knew whether he meant a war, a migration, a military service, or a story he heard from his own grandfather. The younger relatives treated it as color. The family also had a small medical oddity that nobody called an oddity. Most adults could drink milk without discomfort. Milk went into coffee, cheese sat on the table. A glass of milk with dinner did not feel like evidence, it felt like food. Then, one male cousin ordered a Y-DNA test. The result came back as R1a-Z93. That branch is often discussed across parts of Central and South Asia, and in debates about Indo-Iranian-related steppe movements. It does not prove the family is Central Asian. It does not erase their village, language, or religion. It only says that one paternal line belongs to a branch with a much older map than the family expected. Another relative took an autosomal test. The report showed expected regional ancestry, but also small signals that seemed to lean eastward. Depending on the company, the labels shifted. Eastern European, Baltic adjacent, Central Asian trace. A segment that did not match the clean family story. At first, the family thought the test was wrong. That reaction is common. People expect DNA to confirm the last few generations. They expect it to validate the name, the nation, the village, and the family religion. But ancient ancestry does not obey modern paperwork. A line can pass through a village for 400 years and still carry a signal from a movement 5,000 years old. This is the new victim segment in ancestry testing. Families whose identity begins in a modern nation, but whose DNA keeps pulling the story below the nation. Not victims of harm in the ordinary sense, victims of a flattened record. Their family history was reduced to a flag, a surname, or a church book, while the genome kept older movements underneath. The Yamnaya horizon on the Pontic-Caspian steppe was not a nation. It was a broad archaeological world tied to pastoralism, wagons, herding, and kurgan burials, those raised mounds that mark the dead across the grassland. Horses and wheeled vehicles changed what distance meant. Herding changed what wealth could look like. Families could move with animals, equipment, and alliances across spaces that would have trapped earlier farmers. Ancient DNA from skeletons connected to steppe and steppe-derived contexts showed that this movement was not just cultural imitation. People moved. Their descendants mixed with farmers and hunter-gatherers. Their paternal lines expanded in some regions with unusual force. The fictional family's report looks convincing because the clues point in the same direction. Borderland surname, rider legend, R1a-Z93, autosomal traces, milk tolerance, a family story that always felt slightly too old for the paper trail. Still, the model is not finished. The milk clue seems modern. It feels like diet, not ancestry. But ancient DNA changed that timeline too. The fifth hidden sign is lactase persistence, and it is one of the most misunderstood clues in family ancestry. Lactase is the enzyme that helps digest lactose, the sugar in milk. Most mammals reduce lactase production after infancy. Many humans do too. But in some populations, adults commonly keep producing lactase. That trait is called lactase persistence. In Europe, a major lactase persistence signal is tied to a variant near the LCT gene, often discussed around RS4988235. Families who tolerate milk well may be carrying a version shaped by thousands of years of selection. In places where dairying mattered, adults who could use milk calories may have had an advantage during famine, disease, or harsh seasons. That sounds like a simple steppe clue. It is not. Early steppe herders used milk. Archaeological evidence and dental calculus studies have supported the idea that dairying was part of steppe pastoralist life. But ancient DNA complicated the story. Many early herders may not have carried the European lactase persistence variant at high frequency, even if they consumed dairy in processed forms like yogurt, kefir, or cheese. The genome kept one more record. The ability to digest fresh milk as an adult appears to have risen strongly later, over the last several thousand years, under intense selection in some regions. That means milk tolerance can be connected to pastoralist lifeways without being a direct Yamnaya badge. This correction is important because it prevents a myth from forming. A family that drinks milk easily is not automatically steppe descended. A family that cannot tolerate milk is not excluded from steppe ancestry. Selection can change trait frequencies long after ancestry arrives. The sixth hidden sign is the ancient DNA reversal itself. Before ancient DNA, many arguments about the steppe were built from archaeology, linguistics, and modern genetic patterns. Researchers studied burial mounds, wagon remains, reconstructed languages, and present-day haplogroups. Those clues were powerful, but they could not show exactly what Bronze Age people carried in their cells. Then scientists began sequencing DNA from ancient skeletons. The petrous bone, a dense part of the skull near the inner ear, became one of the most valuable objects in the field because it can preserve DNA better than many other bones. A small piece of that bone could turn a grave into a genetic witness. The 2015 Hawk study and the 2015 Allentoft study did not answer every question. No single paper could. But they gave researchers a new scale of evidence. Skeletons from the Bronze Age showed steppe-related ancestry expanding dramatically across large regions. Corded-ware individuals carried large Yamnaya-related ancestry. Later, Bell-Beaker-associated movements helped reshape Western Europe. Steppe-related ancestry also became part of later population histories, moving east and south. This reversed the older comfort of the map. It was no longer enough to say that pottery styles spread, or languages spread, or horse culture spread. In many places, people moved too. The family report becomes more serious in that light. A Y-DNA branch is not floating alone. A surname region is not floating alone. A milk tolerance trait is not floating alone. They all sit inside a wider scientific record where bones from Bronze Age graves carry the missing context. Still, every clue has a limit. Ancient DNA can show population movement. It cannot tell you that your family story is heroic. It cannot prove a single ancestor rode across the steppe. It cannot turn a modern person into an ancient tribe. The evidence is powerful because it is narrower than fantasy. That narrowness is the point. The seventh hidden sign is a mismatch between family identity and autosomal DNA. This is the clue most ancestry apps struggle to explain cleanly. A person grows up with a clear identity: Irish, Polish, German, Russian, Serbian, Scottish, Lithuanian, Punjabi, Pashtun, Ukrainian, English. A village identity, a religious identity, a caste identity, a regional identity. Then the DNA report shows an unexpected trace that seems to lean Eastern European, Baltic, Scandinavian, Germanic, Central Asian, or South Asian, in a way the family story did not predict. The app may present it as a tiny percentage. It may appear and disappear after an update. It may sit inside a broader category that hides the older source. That does not automatically mean the trace is wrong. It may mean the modern label is too shallow. Steppe-related ancestry is widespread and diluted. It is not rare nobility. It is not pure blood. It is not a secret caste above other people. In many populations, it became one layer among others, mixed with ancestry from early farmers, local hunter-gatherers, later migrants, traders, soldiers, captives, spouses, and neighbors. Mixture is not the exception. Mixture is the record. This is why pattern stacking matters. A surname from a region touched by steppe-related ancestry is weak alone. A migration legend is weak alone. R1a or R1b is incomplete alone. An autosomal signal can be vague. Lactase persistence can be misleading. But when the clues align, the family story deserves a second reading. The responsible conclusion is not, we are Yamnaya. That is too simple. The responsible conclusion is, one or more lines in this family may carry ancestry shaped by Bronze Age steppe expansions. That sentence is less dramatic. It is also much closer to the evidence. Return to the opening clue. The surname was never the whole story. It was a door label on a much older house. The milk glass was never proof. It was one biological hint. The Y-DNA line was never identity. It was one paternal thread. The family legend was never a documentary. It was a memory with its edges worn off. Together, they can point backward toward the grasslands. Ancient steppe blood, if your family carries it, is not a metal and not a myth. It is evidence of movement. It is wagons under a wide sky, herds crossing river valleys, burial mounds on the horizon, and children born into mixed communities that later became something else. The genome remembers what paperwork forgot, but it remembers in fragments. That is why careful ancestry matters. It protects the mystery from fantasy. It lets a family ask better questions without turning DNA into superiority, ownership, or destiny. It places modern people inside deep time without flattening anyone else's story. Subscribe to the Genome Archive for careful genetic history, ancient DNA mysteries, and the parts of family ancestry most test reports compress into simple labels. The next surname, blood marker, or unexpected percentage may not tell you who you are. It may tell you how many roads had to survive before you existed. No purity myth, only evidence carried forward.